Maintaining a perfectly curated political image on the world stage depends on one crucial thing: absolute control over the environment. After 43 years, an Indian Prime Minister finally landed in Oslo, Norway. The visit followed a highly successful international playbook. There were grand speeches celebrating democracy and a massive, enthusiastic reception from the overseas Indian diaspora, complete with drums and cheering crowds. The diplomatic weight of the trip was capped off when King Harald himself presented Prime Minister Narendra Modi with Norway's highest civilian honor. Everything was running to plan, until a local Norwegian reporter named Healy stepped up. She simply asked the Prime Minister if he would take some questions from the freest press in the world. The Prime Minister completely ignored the question. He refused to answer, exposing a strict reliance on heavily scripted, controlled environments over actual, open dialogue. Within hours, the domestic IT cell mobilized. Rather than addressing the journalist's question, they launched an online retaliation campaign, branding the reporter as a spy and a planted agent of George Soros. The state's reaction transformed a simple, unscripted question into a viral demonstration of the very problem the journalist was asking about. To run damage control, the Ministry of External Affairs called a retaliatory press briefing right there in Norway. The goal was to firmly put the journalists in their place. The Indian officials walked in expecting a familiar dynamic. They anticipated reporters who would quietly take notes, sip their tea, and accept the official narrative without pushing back. But Nordic journalists operate differently. Instead of taking dictation, they relentlessly pressed the Indian ambassador on India's human rights track record and whether the country could be trusted. A state can easily silence and control media within its own borders, but applying those same authoritarian tactics to international journalists produces the exact opposite result. Faced with direct scrutiny, Ambassador Sibi George launched into a defensive 13-minute non-stop monologue to deflect the questions entirely. Rather than addressing modern human rights, he began lecturing the room on India's 5,000-year history. He cited the invention of chess, the practice of yoga, and the peaceful legacy of Mahatma Gandhi. At the peak of his deflection, the ambassador actually started reciting the preamble to the Indian Constitution word for word to run out the clock. When the reporters inevitably tried to interrupt and guide him back to the topic, he visibly lost his temper. He trembled, snapped at the journalists, and furiously told them how and when he would answer. The press conference ended with an official representative shouting at reporters to explain the depth of Indian tolerance, while the actual questions about human rights and press freedom remained unanswered. There was a time in Indian politics when a prime minister facing brutal, unscripted interrogations was considered a standard democratic norm. Journalists would routinely interrupt the leadership, wave papers in their faces, and demand answers regarding high-level corruption, all without facing state retaliation. Today, that dynamic has been replaced by stenography. A large portion of the domestic media now operates as public relations agents, manufacturing communal outrage to shield the government from real scrutiny. This chart tracks India's World Press Freedom Index, revealing a steep downward trend that hits 157. In the wider dataset, even neighboring countries like Pakistan and Sri Lanka now sit at higher positions. While the domestic narrative remains tightly controlled through compliant media, the global mask is slipping in front of international audiences. If a basic question from a single reporter is enough to send an entire government into a panic, the problem isn't the journalist. The danger lies in the authoritarian reality they are so desperately trying to hide.